Scientology could be called, well, you could call it a religion of religions.
Howdy everybody, and welcome to the Indie Scientology podcast. I'm your host Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy, and these are secret closed-door briefings for free zone Scientologists. They're about Scientology and the world. Information that you need to know on these topics, because there's a lot of stuff going on in Scientology and there's a lot of stuff going on in the world, a lot of stuff that you don't know about. Today's briefing is about the Strange Angel TV show. Oh my God. It is a damn good show and it deserves a briefing because it's just so good. I finished watching it about a week or 10 days ago, so I was more excited about it back then, and I probably should have done this briefing, but I'm doing it tonight and I'm in a good keyed out mood tonight. I'm particularly keyed out, which is fairly cool. I'm feeling particularly peaceful, and it's interesting because my environment around me has become particularly peaceful, because I notice that's what happens, that when I'm really keyed out, everyone's really keyed out. Like, I can affect my whole city pretty much. I know it sounds out there, but things really are magical. And that relates a bit to the Strange Angel TV show, which I'll go into. So basically, this Strange Angel show and how it relates to Scientology is that it's about the rocket scientist Jack Parsons, right? And Hubbard was hanging out with this guy before he got involved with Scientology, like sort of starting in 1950 with Dianetics. That's sort of when he started going, you know, that's when he started Dianetics and Scientology and all that sort of stuff. But before that, he was hanging out with Jack Parsons, right? And there's a lot to this story. But this Jack Parsons guy was into Aleister Crowley's cult, basically. But I'm using cult word in a complimentary way because cults are actually pretty cool, and I reckon people should get into them. Like, you're really missing out. The mainstream media want you to think cults are crap because they don't want you doing them. They don't want you learning how to be magical. They don't want you making your will become reality. They don't want you to be able to postulate. Do you understand? They don't want you to be powerful. They want you to just be a slave. So they demonize cults and make them out to be creepy and scary and all this sort of stuff. But cults are really cool. They are like you're playing with fire a little bit. Like, some people can get screwed over by cults and stuff, and there are some crazy cults which the government set up, like the Jonestown massacre. The government did that. That was like funded by the CIA and stuff. So sometimes they get out of hand, but they're usually the government ones that are the government were using that cult for to do mind control experiments and stuff. That's a little secret about the Jonestown massacre that you can look into. Jim Jones was a CIA agent. But anyway, Hubbard was involved with this Jack Parsons guy. So this TV show is super cool, right? Because it shows Jack Parsons getting into his rocket science and then getting involved with the Aleister Crowley cult called Thelema and stuff. And then it only goes for 2 seasons, and then suddenly Hubbard comes into the storyline, and you're like, and the show's just getting better and better and better. It starts off slow, but it gets better and better and better. And then Hubbard comes in, and then boom, the show stops. He's literally on the screen for 10 seconds and that's it. It's quite upsetting, actually. But I never really got into Game of Thrones, and I haven't really got into modern TV shows. But this one was really good. So that's why I was like, oh my God, this is so good. People have to watch this. Like, it's so down my alley. Like, it's about rocket science, because rocket science is cool and stuff, like space travel and stuff. And, you know, World War II is cool, and it's got spies in it. And then it's about about cults and stuff, and like interesting spiritual tech, because there's tech out there, you know what I mean? There's different interesting tech and stuff, and magical stuff, and you know, like, and a lot of it is about, like, I know that like as the story goes on, like it gives you an idea of what Thelema might be about, like what it would be like to join Thelema, this religion. I think that's what it's called, or the OTO, basically OT. Yeah, they'll give you a little secret about Hubbard, huh? This literally is, this OTO cult is Hubbard's religion. It's what it was before he got involved in Scientology, and it was his religion for the rest of his life, and Scientology as well. And because I mean, I've investigated it, and you can tell, because Hubbard was really into having his own will, making reality, like being self-determinism, get your own will. You know what I mean? What do they say? The Thelema saying is, do what thou wilt. Hubbard was like that. He was like, who gives a shit what people think? Do what thou wilt. You know what I mean? Do what you want to do and bring that into reality, you know? And you can tell Hubbard lived by this, and I actually live by this. So as I was watching this show, I was like getting introduced a bit to Thelema and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like this. I'm this sort of person stuff. Yeah, this is really good. Yeah, keep on going. And so give me more data, you know what I mean? Because like, you know, it'll talk about like Jack Parsons trying to get a rocket company started or something, and, you know, it's like his own personal journey of trying to, you know, succeed and trying to get this rocket started so he can send a man to the moon and stuff. And so he gets advice, like, you know what I mean? Like in the story as it goes, you hear bits of advice like, you know, you can do it and stuff like that. Or, I don't know, things like, you know, it's your persistence that will make you achieve your goal, and just like cool little things that are just like good philosophy that I like. So the first season is slow, and they get, it takes a while before Jack, and like, so it's based on a true story, but it's like, obviously it's someone's interpretation, and it's like, sometimes real names aren't used in real life, and so it's Hollywood, so, you know, obviously it's not that accurate, but it's still grounded in some truth, and so that's why it's like educational. But he tries to get his rocket science accepted, and he tries to get a grant and all that sort of stuff. He tries to get a company going, and, you know, tries to make rockets for the government and stuff, so that then he can, basically he wants to send a man to the moon because it's cool. And he was in comm with Werner von Braun, and what's really interesting about that is that this is just true stuff in real life, because the Germans were ahead with the rocket science, like they were more advanced than the Americans. So he was going to like Werner von Braun, I don't know, they're like 5 years ahead or something in their rocket tech, for advice and stuff. And it just starts off slow, but then eventually with the second season, he's got the government grants, and he's helping them build rockets that they can attach to aircraft, that when they're taking off, they press the button and shoot the rocket out, and then they can take off a really short runway. Basically, it shoots the craft up faster, and it's called jet assisted takeoff, JATO. And so that's what he was doing, and in the second season it takes off like successfully, and, you know, he gets like a bigger government grant, and he buys the mansion and stuff that's in Pasadena, which you can read about on Wikipedia, and it's in the history books or whatever. So by the second season, it's like his life is like cooler and stuff. But in the first season, it starts off slow, and he's like trying to get the grants and stuff. And a neighbor introduces him into Thelema, the religion, and him and his wife are fairly like conservative and stuff, like conservative Christians, and his wife's like a Christian goody-goody, and she's really hot as well. So that's why I like the show as well, because she's this Aryan beauty basically. And she used to be on the Neighbours TV show, which is like filmed not like in Melbourne, like not far from where I am. In fact, I was just working in the area just the other day, which is, I guess, a synchronicity, because I was watching the show. I just finished watching the show before I went and worked in the area, but you get these weird synchronicities happen all the time. So the wife was like quite a conservative Christian and stuff, and he was interested in his rockets, and so this friend introduces him into Thelema, and he basically tries to recruit him. And it actually reminds me of Scientologists, people trying to get recruited into Scientology, and, you know, average people are sort of like, oh, I don't want to try that, oh, it's weird, or like, oh, like people are so conservative and so not into trying new things. Like I remember when I first got into Scientology, I'm like pretty open and into new things. So I wasn't like hold offy like other people are, but a lot of people like hold offy and stuff. And so you see that this friend persist and keep on trying to encourage them to get into Thelema. And so Jack realizes that in Thelema he can learn how to, how he can make his will occur, how he can get his rocket program, basically what he wants. Like he realizes, you know, hey, I can use, you know, he goes, yeah, like Thelema is weird and stuff because it's like a sex magic cult. But he's like, at the start, he's like, yeah, so it's weird, but like, he doesn't say this exactly, but you can tell he's thinking this. Yeah, Thelema is weird, but I can, this can improve me and this can get me so that I can, you know, get this rocket program and stuff. So he gets into it, and then he gets his wife into it, and I think his wife started liking it as well. And so she's like, because she was a real conservative Christian, she was like a choir girl and stuff. You know, she was really slow to recruit, but that's why the first season is just so freaking slow. But slowly, bit by bit, it gets more and more entertaining. They finally get more and more into Thelema, and you know, Jack gets his rocket program and stuff. And then the second season, you know, they've got the mansion and stuff, and they're like wealthy, you know, with the government contract and stuff to build rockets and stuff. And they've got the cult, the Thelema cult, lives in their house in Pasadena because they get kicked out of their current premises because the locals don't like having a sex cult or whatever in their area. But they come into Jack Parsons' mansion in Pasadena, which is really cool. And so they do their like ceremonies and stuff, and there's tons of sex scenes. Like it's a really, like, it stimulates your second dynamic. Like there's like, whoa, like there's a lot of sex scenes, because you know how Hollywood is, they love putting in sex scenes, but when the actual story legitimately is about a sex cult, right, then they've just got free reign on the sex scenes. They're allowed to put in all this sexual, like it's legitimately a part of the storyline, right? So they just pump into sex scenes. And there's also lots of scenes where they take hallucinogenic drugs, and that's really interesting and stuff, because like Jack will take, you know, the hallucinogenic drug or whatever, and then he'll see visions and it'll help him with his science, which is what hallucinogenic drugs do. And you can tell that the writers have used these drugs because just the way that they depict the drug scenes and stuff, it's like accurate as to what happens when you take hallucinogenic drugs, because that's a secret about these drugs and stuff. They're not like these dirty street drugs, which you see like drug addicts and stuff taking. They're like a total different type of drug. They're called like a plant medicine by people who take ayahuasca and stuff. Like it's something else. And Aleister Crowley's cult was like heavily into peyote and like these magical substances, because they can open up your spiritual side and they can assist with magic and stuff. And so what happens with hallucinogenic drugs is that you can, like if a scientist like they did this, like some tests with LSD or whatever, where they took scientists and they couldn't solve a problem, but then they gave them LSD, and then after that they could solve the problem, because it like opens up your mind and you go into like theta land, and you get answers about life and stuff. And so it shows that in the story where he takes a hallucinogenic drug or something, and then it assists him with his rocket inventing, basically. So it's just a fascinating, great story. And so another thing as well is I've been studying history during that period, right? Because I've been investigating my own past life. And it's quite possible that I was involved with rocketry at the Edwards Air Force Base, which is, you know, only 100 Ks or whatever from Pasadena, right? And I was into rocketry and all that sort of stuff, and I was helping design things and stuff. And so I'm trying to find out who I was and that sort of stuff. And so I've had to look into history in that. But and one thing that the story is definitely inaccurate about is that the story makes out as if Jack Parsons in America was the only person, his group were the only people that were involved in rocketry in the early 40s and the mid 40s and stuff. That's not true at all. So the government had stuff like going on at Edwards Air Force Base and stuff with rockets and stuff, and probably other places, but they're like really top secret stuff, right? But the Jack Parsons one, this is what I think. The Jack Parsons one is the one that America wanted its enemies to think that that was its rocket program. Okay? So it's like, that was like the cover story, if you know what I mean. Because Jack Parsons, it seems like the stuff he was doing wasn't that well funded, right? It wasn't hidden too well, and it just seemed a bit dodgy and not professional, right? And so basically, German spies or whatever would, go into America and find out, oh yeah, Jack Parsons, blah, 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 and then report back to the Germans, right? And say, yeah, the Americans have a shit rocket program going on at the moment, basically. Yeah, and so that's possibly what could have been going on, right? But then really, the Americans actually have quite a good rocket program going on secretly at Edwards Air Force Base. And that's where they really don't want any spies getting into. But they know the Jack Parsons group was infiltrated. Do you see what I mean? With spies feeding the Germans data, right? Because they knew that Jack Parsons was into Aleister Crowley stuff, and Aleister Crowley was actually a Nazi, and so he was feeding the Germans data about what Jack Parsons was doing, right? So I'm combining my own study of history with what was going on in the TV show as well. But this is why it's such an entertaining story, because you're like, what the hell is going on? And they depict Aleister Crowley in the story as well, and that's like, whoa. Anyway, basically, So I hope you get this idea I'm trying to say. It's like America doesn't just have one rocket program. You know what I mean? They have like multiple going on, but they try and stop spies from getting into that rocket program, right? So it makes it appear like this is their only rocket program, but they kind of know that this rocket program is the cover story, that they want the Germans and the Japs to think that this is their rocket program. So then they think, oh, some crappy like program that's hasn't invented as much stuff and that. But at Edwards Air Force Base, they were like, had some good rockets going on, and they were like more up to date with what the Germans were doing, and it was much more professional, right? So then the Germans and the Japs say, oh, these Americans don't think that rocketry is that special, and they're just obviously not funding rocketry that much. So that's what they want the enemy to think. So this is why things are so confusing, right? There's just like, when it comes to the game of espionage and stuff, there's all these shifty things you do. You don't just say, oh, we're going to build a UFO, or we're going to build rockets or whatever, and then just start building them and try and keep it secret. You do other things where you like have another group that's like building rockets, and you go, yeah, let the enemy think that this is our rocket program and stuff, and they'll think we're really shit at it and stuff. So it's complex. Now, with Aleister Crowley, right, this is why this whole story is so interesting. So with Aleister Crowley, he was into, he was into like Freemasonry and Rosicrucianism, and Hubbard studied Rosicrucianism as well. And so the first thing Hubbard studied was Rosicrucianism, which is like you could call it a cult, but it's like spiritual teachings and stuff. And then he came across this Jack Parsons group in California and their OTO, their Order Templar Orientis or whatever, their Thelema religion. And so he was already like aware of the funky side of life and magic and all that sort of stuff. Well, yeah, not as much, but he was already aware of it. So that's why if you look into the history books, Jack Parsons was impressed with Hubbard as soon as he met him, basically. And he goes, oh, this guy's really cool, he's very well versed in magic, and he's and he says something like, oh, and he's really good with Thelema and the whole idea of doing what your will is, and basically not Q&Aing all the time and not being a wuss and just being there and just doing what you want to do and living your life and not being controlled by fear and stuff. But it's also doing what you believe. Thelema is also doing what you believe your mission is in your life, like what your purpose is. And that's why, me personally, it's great that I watch your show, because that's what I've been trying to work out myself. Like, what the hell am I doing here? What am I supposed to do with my life? You know, what's the meaning of my life? You know, so that's why when you hear them talk about do what thou wilt, they're trying to, the people who are following Thelema are trying to find out what the meaning is of their life. And so I'm just like, this is so me, you know what I mean? Like, if it was up to me, I would be involved with like 4 different cults, but I've only really got one cult at the moment because I just don't have the time for it, you know what I mean? Like one religion, but I'm into all this stuff, like trust me, it's just cool. But so I really connected with Thelema. I was like, oh yeah, I could totally say, yeah, cool. So I feel like watching this show was like a little dodgy version of studying Thelema. But, you know, maybe one day far in the future or something, I'll actually get into it. And even probably do their wild sex magic or whatever. I mean, that just sounds interesting. Like, what the hell? Like, I'm not into any kinky things. Like, I'm actually really not into that. I'm busy with other stuff. But, you know, if I was to do anything kinky, it would be this sex cult stuff. I reckon it's pretty cool. Now, so anyway, so when it comes to the storyline of this TV show, Strange Angel, right? And I'm going to play the trailer for it and stuff soon. Maybe soon. Depends on how long this goes for. But the storyline depicts Jack Parsons as being Jack Parsons being involved with Caltech, the university, being the only rocket group in America, and it just depicts it inaccurate. Like, it doesn't talk about the real secret things going on at government Air Force bases and stuff. And so that's where it's like historically inaccurate, because if you're watching this and like many things, when you watch many TV shows and stuff, they don't paint history as to what really occurred, and you can sort of get dumbed down a little bit. So remember, when you're watching this storyline and the government's thinking about investing in rockets with Jack Parsons and he's having a hard time talking them into it around 1940, realize that it's kind of like, that's just kind of bullshit. Like, they were like, the government, the military and stuff does stuff full on in secret, and they're well funding it. And so it wasn't like Jack Parsons started American rocketry. There's more to the story. You don't hear about it. It's like when one day, if the truth about UFOs get released and it says how the government's been building UFOs, you're not going to get an accurate history as to how they were actually invented and developed and stuff. Like, they're not going to just, they develop these things in secret for years before they start letting people know that they're even thinking about developing them. You see what I mean? Like, it's complex. So in the second season, he gets the house and stuff, like I was saying, and more rocket grants. And there's dramas between Jack Parsons' wife and her dad, because the dad, or stepdad or whatever, the dad wants the cult shut down, so he comes after them. So there's some like court dramas and stuff. And then Aleister Crowley comes into the story, right? So cool. Because it's such a funny depiction of Aleister Crowley. And this is Aleister Crowley, the one who Hubbard said was his good dear friend. See, I don't think you can get that data if you're involved with the Church of Scientology, but if you're involved with Free Zone Scientology, we can hear in Hubbard's words him saying, Aleister Crowley, my dear friend, and him saying it, right? Because you don't say someone's your dear friend unless, you were actually friends with him, like you were good friends with him. So if you went to a Thelema meeting or whatever at Jack Parsons' house 3 times or something, you're not going to then go talk about Aleister Crowley like he's your dear friend or whatever. Like, you must have been in con with Aleister Crowley. Do you see what I mean? Or at least done a lot of his religion and really connected with him and really agreed with him and felt like he's your dear friend. So this is what's so good, because The church likes to delete things from history that is out PR, that's not public relations. It sounds weird. So like they don't want people knowing that Hubbard was involved with a sex cult before Scientology. Do you see what I mean? So so that's why it's so good in the free zone, like this, the hidden South Africa lecture, the so-called racist one. It's so good to get these little snippets of good data, because the church doesn't delete the boring data. The church deletes the data that's like essential to working out the truth about life here on Earth, right? Because that line, Aleister Crowley, my dear friend, that sends you down a rabbit hole of investigating Hubbard's history that changes your whole outlook on life. Because you look into OTO and you see, oh my God, Hubbard kind of copied off this Crowley guy. You see how Hubbard got the whole idea for Scientology. Because he saw what Crowley did and he thought, well, let's just bring this to the masses. Let's make this not as much a weird sex cult. Let's make this more palatable to the masses and stuff. And he tried to make his own version and tried to improve on it. And what's interesting is that Aleister Crowley called himself the Beast 666, which is, I don't know, is, I guess, a reference to Satan or something. But it doesn't seem like he was evil. It seems like he was a very complex guy, almost like Hubbard, but he was much more outpointy than Hubbard. But still, Hubbard was a little bit odd as to whether he was a good guy or not. Like, I totally think he was a good guy, and his contributions to humanity helped life here on Earth and helped me. But at the same time, he did have a dodgy side to him, and he did sort of stuff up his members a little bit. And so Hubbard is he's a complex guy. It's not as simple as just saying he was a perfect good person. Like it's a little bit complex. Well, with Crowley, it's even more complex, because he was having like lots of gay sex, and he kind of acted like he was evil because he didn't like Christianity. He wanted to expose it because it made slaves, which is true about Christianity. It just dumbs people down spiritually and makes them into like these just spiritually dumb people. And let's be honest, I'm not going to lie. It's a control system. It's a spiritual control system, a religious control system. But Crowley did do some things that are, like, you listen to his history and it's like, oh, it's a bit, he seems like he was good and bad. Whereas Hubbard was definitely more good, but questionable. But Crowley really was, it seems like possibly was actually good and bad. But it seems like he was a cool guy. And when you study some of his stuff, like even if you just listen to his stuff on Wikipedia and some of his books, it's really hard to understand, but you start to pick up on this, do what thou wilt, and you start to I don't know, you start to maybe go into his personality or something, but it's cool, right? It's cool. The whole thing's cool. So Crowley referred to himself as the Beast 666 or something. And if you study Crowley's life and Hubbard's life, there's some weird similarities between them, like the way how they both started like their own cult, the way they both were very like into doing their own will. They had this attitude which is really important as to if you're postulating, out the door goes ethics. They seem to follow that rule where it's just like, if you want to achieve something, you just go and achieve it and just go full ball 110%. You know what I mean? And don't be too worried about ethics, right? Which is actually kind of like a true attitude. Like if you want to achieve something, you really want to bring your will into reality. Like if you want to make rockets or, I don't know, start a religion or something and make it a success, you do have to park your ethics to the side a little bit. And I know it seems strange, but it's just like you need to just sort of go, you need to not be so worried about breaking rules or what's right or wrong and stuff. And you just need to go, pfft. And so Hubbard seemed to have a little bit of that attitude of just like, fuck it, I'm getting my postulate. And Crowley very much seemed to have this attitude as well, like just burn someone who gives a shit about that, fuck it, make my postulate, boom. You know what I mean? And so Crowley had a bit of that as well. Like, well, actually a lot of it, like more than Hubbard. So, well, like for example, you find a lot of wussy, nerdy people, when they want to go and achieve something, they go, oh, that's against the rules, or you can't do this, or oh, you can't do that. It's just like, shut up and just, do you want to achieve something or not? Do you want to get it done or not? So, anyway, I actually think wussy people use rules or laws as an excuse to, like, you know, cover up the fact that they're basically scared. So, like, the real truth is that, you know, if they were honest, they would say, look, I'm just an absolute pussy and I'm scared. And that's why I don't want to go and achieve what I want to do and stuff. That'll be the truth, but they won't say that. They'll go, oh, but it's, you know, against the, I don't know, you can't really do that because of blah, 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 blah. And what about the parking ticket? Or like just little shit like that. Like, it's just like they're coming up with excuses. So Crowley called himself the Beast, right? And he like pretended like he was like the devil or something as a joke. And the media, of course, because all the way back then, like 100 years ago, right? Because Crowley was around from like 1870 to 1947. He's like a whole generation before Hubbard and all that sort of stuff. It's really interesting. And he was born into a family that was sort of aristocratic, and that's just like Hubbard. Hubbard's got sort of an aristocratic family. He's got, you know, heritage where he was the richest guy in America. The richest guy or the second richest guy in America in like the 1700s. The richest guy or the second richest guy in America. I can't remember which one. But that's freaking huge. Imagine being the richest guy. That's like Bill Gates of the 1700s or whatever. So Hubbard's got aristocraticness in his DNA, and all these notable people in his family heritage as well. So anyway, so it's just interesting how they both got a bit of an aristocratic background. And they both got dimples on their face as well, you'll look. And as they got older, into older age, they also got chubby. Because not everyone gets chubby, but some people, you know, as they get 40, 50, 60, they just get chubbier. And like when they're 60 years old, they're like a chubby, sort of solid, heavy-looking man. And that's what Crowley was like, and Hubbard was like that as well. And they also got borderline obese as they got older. And they also seem to have burnt themselves out in their life so that their last few years they were in pretty bad shape. Because they were taking on the world, you know what I mean? Trying to bring their will into reality and stuff. So there's a lot of similarities. But Crowley called himself the Beast. By the way, he was also quite popular in the 60s because people, you know, started to get into hallucinogenic drugs in the 60s, and they started to get into the whole attitude of, you know, do what you want and stop being such a conservative, like nerdy Christian and stuff. And so there was like a revival of Crowleyanism and his Salima religion in the 60s. And that's why you get stuff like the Doors movie where it shows Jim Morrison, he might have been drinking blood or just, I don't know, doing some weird thingo. I don't know if Crowley drank blood, by the way. Maybe. Wouldn't be surprised. But that's where this thingo of like this black magic stuff in the 60s came about. And the Led Zeppelin, they were into like black magic and stuff, but it's not like it's evil, but it's just like they were into like paganism basically, not Christian, and they were into like magical stuff like Harry Potter shit. Because Harry Potter's real, basically. Harry Potter's paganism. It's like Freemasonry, it's like freaking Rosicrucianism, it's like Crowley stuff, it's other spiritual tech. It's kind of like Scientology. Scientology is like a continuation of these magical practices and stuff, right? And magic, by the way, means a way, and they have this in the storyline as well, I think, a way to bring, magic is basically postulating. It's just like making the universe conform to your will. Do you see what I mean? You want that car, you get the car. You want the weather to be good tomorrow, the weather's good. That's magic. A magician, that's magic, M-A-G-I-C-K. M-A-G-I-C is a magic, like the stage magic, the showman stuff. It's not real, it's like tricks. But magic, M-A-G-I-C-K, that's this whole thing of just postulating. So in Scientology, we've been trying to just postulate and just make reality, like think that person's hat will fall off and it just falls off. Crowley was totally into that sort of stuff, and that's where Hubbard got all this stuff from, right? Crowley was obsessed with trying to be magical and trying to do anything that he had to do if it was, having sex in front of a crowd of people or whatever their weird technology was, drinking whatever it was, just and saying whatever weird chants or praying to whatever weird gods or whatever, just doing anything so that they can bring their, so they can be self-determined and just what they want to have happen happens. Because that's just super cool. Like imagine that. You could walk around and you could like freaking well just really get shit happening the way you want it to be. That's awesome. I mean, I guess everyone's life and my whole life constantly is always wanting and trying to get better. And I'm getting better and better at it as to making what I want to have happen. Getting better and better at life and winning at the game of life. That's the whole point. So that's magic. Anyway, so I know I said there's heaps, but he called himself the Beast, right? And where this gets really, really down the rabbit hole and really, really interesting is I've got to be really careful what I talk about here. There's a special document, a top document in Scientology. Right at the top, secret. And I'm not going to say, I'm just trying to think how can I word this so that people don't well, I don't know what to do because I always believe in the truth and telling people the truth and saying it. So I don't know what I'm supposed to say right now. But let's just say I'll let you connect the dots. You can go find the document. It's very out PR. Okay? It's very high gradient. You shouldn't read it. It's not auditing tech, so it's not like you're going to read it and do exercise and fuck your mind up or some shit. But it's just a document to introduce OT8. It's called the Jesus Thingo. The OT8 student briefing, and it's a document that introduces OT8, right? So it actually doesn't talk about how to do OT8, but just talks about, hey, I'm going to drop the body soon, because it was by Hubbard and it was written in 1980. And he says, something like, I'm going to drop the body soon, and I'm releasing this new level. And it's not just, it doesn't just say that. It says some just epically deep data, just like, whoa. If you're not ready for it, the reason why I say I don't want you to read it if you're not ready for it, because you're going to read it, I'm going to tell you, you're going to go, what the fuck, Hubbard was a nutter. And it's going to make you want to leave Scientology. All right? So that's why, and when I read it, I was already pretty well educated. I first read it probably 3 years ago. I was probably pretty heavily educated, right? Not anywhere near as much as now, but I was pretty switched on. And even I read it and I was like, whoa, like this is really making me think, was Hubbard a nutter? Like, because it's just like, it's really out public relations. Like, if you want to show someone what the definition of out public relations is, if they're like, what's public relations? Public relations is what people think of you and stuff. So if Hubbard walked around when he was doing Scientology and delivered lectures and he was wearing like a painted suit and he was naked but they painted a suit onto him, everyone would be like, what the fuck? That's bizarre. Who's this weird guy starting a religion and walking around in a painted suit? That would be out public relations, right? Well, so hopefully you get the idea of public relations. It's everywhere. Presidents use it all the time. Prime ministers, it's just, whoa. When you learn how to spot public relations, oh, man, heaps of people use it. It's like, businessmen use it, tradesmen use it. It's like how they present themselves and stuff so that they can get ahead in life. Well, the church is obsessed with keeping their public relations looking very good and nice. You don't want to have bad public relations. Well, in this document, Hubbard says stuff that's like, whoa, that's not good public relations. Like, you don't really want people to know this. Like, you know what I mean? It's like him walking around naked with weird stuff painted on him and it's not good for the reputation of Scientology. So the church obviously wants to keep it secret, and they deny that it ever exists, because they nowadays, and this is why it's so good in the free zone, because you can get this information. We have it in the free zone. You can get it, you can go on the internet and read it, and you're not going to get killed or whatever. You're not going to get heaps of trouble with your free zone group. But in the church, you're not allowed to go on the internet, and you're allowed to find this document. And also, the church says that this document doesn't exist or whatever. They deny it, because what happened is, when they released OT8, for the first 3 months, they had this introduction document in the OT8. And all these people went PTS because it's such an extreme thing to read. Because people are just like, what the hell? Because you literally think, oh, is Hubbard a nutter? Like, what? As if someone would think this, right? It's so groundbreakingly deep data. Because the truth is freaking wacky and bizarre. This is what you got to understand. Like, my videos are wacky, right? Because I'm just saying the truth. The truth is just completely bizarre. It's the lies that sound normal and reasonable and sensible and all this sort of stuff, right? But the actual truth is truth is stranger than fiction, right? So you read this document, people were reading it back in 1988 when they released OT8, and you're like, what the hell is this? And people went PDS. They're like, this is crazy and stuff, Hubbard's a nutter, I can't believe I've spent all my money on Scientology, this is just ridiculous. This is what people were thinking, and they went PDS, right? And also possibly that the level was delivered incorrectly. But anyway, so what I'm saying is that you have to make a decision if it's the right thing for you. I don't regret reading it, but I honestly, after I did read it, I was like, whoa. It did make me question, is Hubbard a nutter? Like, is this Scientology all a joke? Because this is just so deep. It just sounds so wacky. But now I've investigated it more and more and more and more, and what I've discovered is that, yes, this document is real. It's not made up, okay? The church is lying when they say that it's just something that the enemy made up to try and pick on Scientology. And also, not only is it a real document, the information in it is accurate. The only thing I don't know about is the Jesus stuff. It's a little bit too out there because I did an investigation into Jesus. He was around 2,000 years ago. It's so hard to get reliable information. Like, let's say 9/11. You can study 9/11 now and you can get good data. But imagine, and you can work out what the truth about 9/11, right? How the government did it and stuff. Now, imagine 2,000 years' time, the information gets more and more messed up and mistranslated and stuff. And back 2,000 years ago with Jesus, there wasn't as much historical records. So it's all just like, my conclusion of looking into Jesus was, I have no conclusion. I can't conclude anything. It's like you're going in to investigate a business that's had a problem with it, right? But you go in there and the business has got a problem, but all the files got deleted off the computer. So you can't see financial records, you can't see who the hell was employed there. You can't do an investigation. You're like, what? There's no data. So that was my conclusion on studying into Jesus. This is very hard, but no. Well, actually, I have an idea of the truth about Jesus, and I shouldn't say in this video. That's for probably another thing. But I could never get to, I like to get to, like 90% certainty. I couldn't get to 90% certainty. I just have an idea of what Jesus could have been, and the information's all messy and a piece of crap and unreliable, so it's just like, I can't conclude anything. So in this OT8 document, Hubbard says stuff about Jesus, but I can't confirm that. But the other stuff that he talks about, I can confirm, and it seems like it's accurate and true, but it's groundbreaking. But anyway, in that document, I'm just trying to think how I can say this without saying what's in the document. But let's just say, by the way, Crowley was on the cover of like one of the Rolling Stones or on the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's album. So the funky people in the 60s and that, they were into Crowley stuff. So it's not like he's like this evil bad guy, and it's, because people who hate Scientology go, oh, Hubbard was into Crowley. Oh, how evil's Hubbard? Oh, Hubbard's bad and Scientology's bad. And it's just like, nah, but Crowley, I don't know. Crowley was like a mixed bag. He was a bit confusing. It's not like he was, I don't know if he was evil. He was trying to set the world free from the shackles of Christianity. He was trying to get people to stop being a nerdy churchgoer, but to live their life and achieve things and stuff. And sometimes, some people use that as an excuse to just like steal or something. So sometimes it backfires, but other times it makes like amazing rocket scientists and stuff. It makes like really cool lives. Anyway, basically in this document, Hubbard says that he is... Okay, I'll get around it by doing this, okay? I'll work out how to get around it. Hubbard's son, who can't really be trusted, but some of the stuff he can be trusted. So he's a mixed bag to listen to. Like this is where it's so complex studying all this sort of information, because you're like, it's not like you got one person who you can just trust all the time. It's like, oh, it's complex. Hubbard's son said that Hubbard thought he was like the Antichrist or the Beast 666. And what's interesting is he said this prior to OT8 getting released. So I'm not going to say what's in that OT8 document, but you can imagine what sort of thing could be said which would send people PDS and that sort of stuff, and just blow people's reality and think that Hubbard's a nutter. Now, so about the beast thingo. So what's really interesting is, like I was saying, there's all these similarities between Hubbard and Crowley, right? And Crowley calling himself the beast, and then Hubbard saying that he could be the Antichrist, you know what I mean? Or he could be the beast and stuff. And so, you know, what's going on? And why would Hubbard want to be the devil or whatever? Like, what the hell's the deal with that? It's like, and then you look into it further and you find out, no, Aleister Crowley's religion is good, and you find out, wow, Christianity is actually bad, and it brought about the Dark Ages in Europe. Because they were into paganism and stuff around Jesus' time, and it was all cool. But then after that, a few hundred years after Jesus died, Europe switched over to Christianity, and it degraded Christianity, and it brought it into a big Dark Ages because it dumbs people down, right? And the whole advancement stopped. Literally, society went backwards. It took on a degraded primitive religion from the Middle East, right? Because you have to understand that, like, a religion is just like basically a science subject, but relating to like life and spirituality and stuff. So if you go and take on a science subject from people from the Middle East, right, which aren't advanced as the Europeans, because you got the Greeks and you got the Romans, right, and you've got actually the ancient, like the real Egyptians, like gone way back, who built the pyramids, were European people, like white people, basically. So what I'm trying to say is that this is why you have to study so much. You have to almost listen to my other lectures, but it's going to get down the rabbit hole with racistness and stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that white people were the first to put a man on the moon. They were first to like invent a UFO. They were first to, you know, actually get somewhere with rockets. Like, I know a Chinese guy came up with the idea ages ago, but we're just more advanced. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, I've traveled the world. I've met other races and that sort of stuff, and white men are more logical. You know what I mean? Other races are interested in dancing and basketball and stuff. Like, seriously, they're just not interested in deep, you know, they're not interested in finding out how the planets rotate around the sun and all this stuff. Like, you know, like they were with like Johannes Kepler or whatever and stuff like that. Like, science is a very white male thing. So when it comes to spirituality and a religion, which is just a science subject, if you take on the Middle Eastern science subject of religion, you're taking on one that's not as smart. Like, the same as if you took on the Middle Eastern idea of biology, right? Let's say you're in 1950. What I'm trying to say is white people are just more advanced, right? So when we have our own religion, right, we end up having a cool religion like Scientology and stuff. It's like advanced spiritual technology. But when you take on a primitive religion, like let's say you take on the Aboriginal religion, their religion is just like dancing around a fire, and they talk about like rivers being created by snakes in the dream time and stuff. It's like almost not even a science subject. It's like, what the hell? Like, it's just primitive. So imagine if we as Europeans took on the Aboriginal religion, it would degrade us and bring about a Dark Ages, even more so than what Christianity did. So what happened with Christianity was that we took on a Middle Eastern religion, which was more primitive, and it overtook our paganism, right? Because it, for whatever reason, was popular. And so it degraded us because we had paganism, which was more like Harry Potter, witchcraft and magic, and more like Scientology, and more like trying to find out the truth, and more scientific, and more, you know, scientific, actually something. So Christianity was more primitive, and it's illogical. Like, it just doesn't make sense and stuff, like if you read it and stuff. So it's just like bizarre, like the Holy Trinity, and Jesus died on a cross in order to save our sins, and it's just like, what sort of barbaric primitive religion is this? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's bizarre, right? So we took that on and degraded us, right? Anyway, so Crowley didn't like Christianity and could spot how it was evil in a control system, and, you know, it didn't help us and stuff. So he was trying to like sort of get rid of Christianity. So, and this is such a long story, that's why he's like the beast, and he's like the, you know, the devil or whatever, because he's like playing fun with the Christians and stuff, because he was in a games, I don't know if it's a games tone level, but I think it's a game. I can't even remember the tone scale, but games or whatever the tone is where you're playing games and shit. Hubbard was in that tone level. I'm in it a little bit as well. Hubbard was in that tone level as well. So they play lots of games and stuff. It's like they do little things that trick people, and they like, it's a very uptone thing. It's not just being cheerful and happy. It's like further above that, right? So Crowley was sort of playing game with the Christians and the mainstream media by going, yeah, I'm the big devil guy, yeah, and like playing, having fun with it and stuff. So Hubbard thought that he could have been the Antichrist they talked about in the Bible, right? And so Hubbard basically, with his Scientology, right, and I'm about to show you, here's some real deep, hardcore truth, right? See this cross? See the meaning of this cross, right? It's a Christian cross, but with a cross through it. Because what does that mean? That means Antichrist. That means it's taking out Christianity. That's the real meaning of this symbol. It's not like some bullshit like the dynamics, like they say, some public relations things in the church where they go, this is the first dynamic, this is the second dynamic, this is the third, and it's just like, no. The real truth when you investigate the history is that Hubbard was anti-Christianity. He was trying to, like, it's not like he hated it massively, but he knew that it was degrading society, and society would be better if they were all Scientologists, right? He tried to take over the world with Scientology, right? These are hardcore truths, by the way. I'm trying to say, like, so that's why Hubbard called himself the Antichrist, because he was like, it's not like he's evil; it's actually a good thing. So this is where it gets really complex, and the Freemasons believe this, and the Rosicrucians believe this. This is like right at the top of these secret societies, right at the top in their beliefs. It doesn't mean they're evil. I know, like, Alex Jones will say something like, oh, those damn Freemasons are Satan worshippers and they're evil. And it's just like, or you say something like that, but it's just like, this is really complex stuff and you don't understand what's going on. Like, they're not really Satan worshippers, but they kind of are. Like, they're just against Christianity. And because what happened as well is that Lucifer isn't this evil guy. He was this guy that was trying to set humans free and trying to get them away from the control system that God was setting up, because God was actually evil. And this, Hubbard gives away clues about this, because you see, like, let's say Battlefield Earth, right? The evil gods in the story Battlefield Earth that come here, the humans refer to them as, let me try and think. Basically, there's, in Hubbard's science fiction and stuff, Hubbard depicts aliens coming here who are tyrants, right? Who are like bad aliens, and the humans interpret them as being gods or whatever. Because that's literally the truth about the Bible and stuff. Like, the God was just some tyrant dude. It was just some crazy alien. He was just an alien Hillary Clinton. That's the best way of describing it. The God in the Bible is an alien Hillary Clinton, right? And these people are like, and she's making them worship Yahweh or whatever, and it's just a load of fucking bullshit, okay? It's just like, you're a freaking alien. And there's more than one of you. It's not just you're a god, you're the gods. Because there's heaps of you, because you're a freaking alien. You came here and you like dominated over some group of people or whatever, and then they ended up worshipping you and you brainwashed them into like thinking you're amazing, and because they were primitive earthlings, you didn't even need to brainwash you. They were just like, oh my God, the amazing aliens. Oh, like, for example, in World War II, when planes flew over like an island, right? The primitives on the island, like in Papua New Guinea, like worship the plane and were like, oh my God, wow, because they're just so amazed by the tech that they just start worshipping it like it's a god. Anyway, so you have to study so many things in order to work out what's going on here on Earth and with these religions and all this sort of stuff, and why Crowley called himself the Beast and why Hubbard called himself the Beast secretly. Crowley openly called himself the Beast. And it's probably wrong me even saying this, because now, whatever, I'm just telling you the truth so you can work things out, because it's, being anti-Christian isn't a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. That's what I'm trying to say. And so So that's like another weird thing, connection between Hubbard and Crowley, right? But anyway, so basically, now we get into the Nazis, because this comes into the storyline, because the Nazis heavy feature, the Nazis are in this story with the strange angel. Basically, the Nazis were the political section of a German version of like Freemasonry, which you could call the Thule Society or the Vril Society, right? So Freemasonry wasn't as popular in Germany, it was more their Thule Society or whatever. And they, like Rosicrucianism and Freemason, were anti-Christianity. Like right at the top were actually anti-Christianity, right? And so they, like in our society where, you know, there's been heaps of famous Freemasons who become presidents and stuff and prime ministers, their Thule Society got their guy to be the boss, to be the chancellor, and that's Hitler. They helped get Hitler into power. So it wasn't so much, you have to understand, when you're looking at Hitler, you're looking at a guy that, it's not like he all did it himself. He had forces behind him that were totally supporting him. The whole country was behind him, and he had this secret society that helped put him into place and craft him and stuff. And so it was much more of a team effort. It wasn't like he was just bossing everyone around and brainwashing everyone into following him. You know what I mean? He was like, this Thule Society helped get him into power, right? So this Thule Society and the Nazis, right, their religion, they were basically, they hadn't worked out their own religion yet, but it was sort of this Thule Society or whatever thing, which was, if you look at the creation of it, it has a lot to do with Rosicrucianism, which has a lot to, and Rosicrucianism is where Crowley got a lot of his OTO stuff from, right? So the roots, what I'm saying, the roots of the stuff that Hubbard was studying and the stuff that Crowley created is going back to Rosicrucianism, and it's going back to Germany and stuff, right? And it's a similar route to what the Nazis were into, right? And that's basically like anti-Christianity, because the Nazis, they didn't quite come out and say they were anti-Christianity, but if they were in power for long enough, they honestly would have kicked out Christianity. That was what was coming next. After the whole big war and everything, they knew that Christianity was just this degraded religion that was like just backwards and had been actually sort of made up by a Jew as well, because there was that Paul of Tarsus or some shit. I can't remember his name, but Paul of Tarsus or whatever. After Jesus died, some Jew boy was there, and then he traveled to Rome, Paul of Tarsus or something, and he said, oh no, I believe in Jesus now, because before he didn't believe in Jesus. And go, I believe Jesus is amazing. And he told the Romans about Jesus and helped create the beginnings of Christianity, right? So the Germans sort of believed in this Thule Society, and Hitler believed this, that Christianity is sort of a control system that came from a Jew, right? And so it's not like they were, I don't know if they were anti-Jesus or whatever, but they acknowledged that the religion had gotten out of hand and actually degraded Europe and stuff. All right, so the Nazis were basically anti-Christian, right? So then here is where the connection with Crowley comes in, because the question is, what the hell was Crowley doing actually secretly helping the Germans? Because Crowley was an MI6 agent during the World War I and World War II or whatever. And so he was, you know, agents always secretly working. They're secretly assisting the British with information. But the truth about Crowley was that he was being a shifty little bughead. He was actually assisting the Germans because he didn't believe in the bullshit democracies and shit that we had in the West. And he didn't believe in, like, he liked what the Germans were into and stuff, like how they were, he knew that they were like into, he knew that right at the top, like the magic that Hitler was into and stuff, the Thule magic and the Rosicrucianism stuff, and he knew that that the Germans were trying to make the German people more self-determined and stuff, and more upturned in getting stuff done. And that's why when Hitler got into power in the early 30s, Germany just boomed and stuff. Like Germany just got real excited and just went, and they were all like on fire, and they were like, yeah, now that's why their amazing marches were going on. They were cheering Hitler, and they were like, hey, Sieger. They're all like uptone as hell. It's like at the Scientology events when we well, I wasn't there, but when Hubbard would, people would cheer Hubbard and be like, cheer, 3 cheers for Hubbard, yeah, and like there was one New Year's, for example, in 1980 where at Flag, where people clapped for like 12 or 15 minutes after they announced Hubbard's name or something. It was like, yeah, because it was like the Germans with the Sieg Heil, like, Sieg, because like they're like, yeah, they're all excited and stuff because they're being set free from the shackles of a bullshit system that's just degrading them and corrupting them like what we live under, and it suppresses us. And when you have a leader that goes up to the top, like Hubbard, it's exciting, it's cool. It's like, yeah, I believe in you, man. We're doing it. We're building a cool society, so we all get behind it. So that's what happened with Hitler. The Germans were all like, yeah, Hitler, and they all loved him. He was just like fucking super rock star popular, right? And see, the thing about World War II and talking about it is so complex because we were on the side that won, all we get is the anti-German propaganda in the mainstream media. So your whole idea of what went on during World War II is all twisted and perverted and corrupted. The same as when you go to a wog on the street and you ask them about Scientology and they go, oh, it's some weird cult or whatever. And their whole idea is crafted by the mainstream media. It's from shitty articles in magazines and newspapers and that crappy A Current Affairs show where they're like, ooh, creepy Scientology, blah, blah, blah. So when I first got into Scientology, I was like, oh, this is cool. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, and I realized those A Current Affairs shows are just bullshit. They're just like these crappy, like they're hit pieces basically. Anyway, so it's the same, and I was like, and Hubbard's actually a really good guy, and Scientology is actually really awesome. And I was like, whoa, this is bizarre. The same thing has happened to the Nazis basically. They've been attacked by the system so much that like the powers that be have dirtied them so much that our opinions of the Nazis and World War II and Hitler and all that sort of stuff is just full of propaganda and black PR. It's just so inaccurate. And if you were there during the 30s and 40s and then you were around today, you would be like, oh my God, this just isn't at all the way it actually was back then. So that's what you got to understand. This is why this is so complex. People don't inspect their history or their knowledge about life. They just think they know things. They're just like, oh yeah, Hitler, yeah, he's that evil, crazy tyrant, and yeah, the Nazis were crazy and shit, and they were evil and that, and yeah, that's just how it is. And they haven't stopped to think, hold on a second, let me actually look over history, and is that really the case? And you find out that we were far more evil than what you think, that a lot of stuff has been hidden from us, and we've just been spoon-fed all the bad stuff about the Nazis. And my conclusion on it, into looking into it, is that I actually think things would have been better if the Nazis had won. I'm serious. That's how, and I'm not saying the Nazis were good. I'm not saying I agree with what they did. But after looking at all the data, I think that they were actually the lesser of two evils. So that's deep data. You know what I mean? That's stuff that people don't know, right? So basically, people will use, they'll say, oh, Crowley was helping the Nazis or whatever secretly, so he's bad. And it's just like, yeah, but this is really complex stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's bad, right? It's just that he knew, the Nazis were going to get rid of Christianity eventually and help. The Nazis were trying to make a superhuman. And that's exactly what Hubbard was trying to, that's exactly what we're trying to do in Scientology. We're trying to make an OT, like a magical superhuman. We're trying to like make us awesome and super powerful and stuff. And that's what the Nazis were trying to do. They were trying to make amazing, perfect people, you know? Anyway, so there's a lot of similarities and stuff. And Hubbard also said, I got this data from John Attack, I don't know if it's totally true, but Hubbard said that he'd done some of the magical practices that Hitler had done. And then when I studied all the history, I was like, yeah, it makes total sense because it comes from, the same root religions and stuff and secret societies and cults or whatever. It comes from the same stuff. So it's just like, yeah. And like I could totally tell that they were into the same magical stuff. And also, if you keep looking to Hitler's history, he was a very spiritual, new agey type of guy. Like he was not Christian, like you can tell. And you can tell he believed in angels and like he believed in will and stuff. He was like, no, when you got a will, it can create reality and stuff. And so like it's very, you know, Crowley and Hubbard like with postulates. Like your intention creates reality, you know. It very much that idea. He went off that. So anyway, so in the story, in this the TV show, Crowley is like, he comes into the storyline and it's really funny. The way they depict him is just so out PR. Like he's depicted as, like, I'm not going to ruin it for you, but it's just so funny. And it kind of seems to imply that he's talking to Jack Parsons because Jack Parsons is a follower of his religion, but he's like possibly collecting data about the rocket programs, then go and tell the Nazis about what they were doing in their rocket program or something. And then it's sort of confusing, and like you don't know who's a spy and not a spy. So for a conspiracy theorist, you're going to absolutely love this show Strange Angel, because you're just like, you're trying to work out what the hell's going on. So what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. You're like, who's a spy? Who's this? Blah, blah. It's just so cool. So what happens is that in the second season, the first season goes only for 10 episodes. The second season, usually the second seasons, because that's when they take the show seriously, because the first season was a success, they usually grant more episodes. In the second season, I only went for 7 episodes. And that means something. And so what happens is it ends where they have one of these big sex orgy parties, and it ends in the morning where they wake up and Hubbard knocks on the door and he says, hello, Jack. He says, oh, I'm going to play it now, but he says, you know, hello, Jack Parsons, or whatever. I heard you're bad. I like that. And then Jack Parsons and his girl are like there looking at him, and then it ends and you're like, what? You're like, oh my God, that's all. I want to see more of Hubbard. You know, I want more to come. It's such a shame. This is an amazing show, right? So it finishes after only 7 episodes. That's an out point. That's strange. 7 episodes, just as Hubbard comes into the storyline. That's very, very strange. So here's my theory on it. I reckon the church got it squashed. I reckon because this show was going to continue for another season and another season, and it was going to depict some really out PR stuff, some real stuff that the church doesn't want people knowing about. Like, because there were apparently some stuff where they did like a Babylon working, which was where they were trying to like give birth to the Antichrist, basically, like an amazing child that would save the world, I guess. And it involved like sex rituals and stuff with, like, you had a young woman there and stuff, because you're trying to get, I think you're basically trying to get her baby in her stomach impregnated with like an amazing spirit or something. That's what I guess it is, or whatever. You can look it up, the Babylon working. But I mean, it's just a smorgasbord of out PR for the church. Like, it's just epic. So I could see how the church was following the program, following how it was going, and they could see how many sex scenes, how outrageous the show was, and they knew that Hubbard was going to come into the storyline. The writers were going to do that, and they could see this was going to be a real big PR problem. And I think that they worked their magic, the Office of Special Affairs, and they got that show cancelled. They made some secret threats or something. But it seems very strange that the second season went for only 7 episodes, when usually second seasons go for even more, right? More episodes. And then it cuts at the exact point Hubbard comes into the storyline. So, you know, this would have been a really good show. This would have been like up there with like X-Files and stuff, just like totally cool, just epic. But we only got 17 episodes in total, and it's just such a shame. Because I really hope they make this again, because this is so cool. This is such a cool show. I think, from my understanding, it depicts one of Hubbard's wives in the story as well. There's this the wife of Jack Parsons, her younger sister, she's smoking hot, really hot. She ends up hooking up, apparently in the history books, she ends up hooking up with Hubbard. and Hubbard runs away with her because he stole her from Parsons, I think. Because Parsons leaves his wife. It's a real long story. Parsons leaves his wife, goes with the hot younger sister, and then Hubbard steals her, and then they go away. And Hubbard steals his boat in history books. And here's where it gets really complex. Because another thing I've got to mention as well is that Hubbard was an agent for the Navy during World War II, and after it he was supposedly just like no longer in the Navy, and it's just like, yeah, right. I mean, that's just not true. No, but he said whenever he got accused, people would accuse him of being into Crowley's stuff and Jack Parsons' stuff and the black magic, Hubbard would say, no, I was doing a mission for the Navy and I had to break up his black magic cult and stuff. And that could very well be true. But I bet you he found the magic interesting and that sort of stuff as well. Like the fact that he had to do this cool mission and stuff and into this interesting cult or whatever. I'm sure he would have liked it and stuff. But it was part of the job, I guess. But from looking into it, I think that he was there on a mission for the Navy because I think he arrived with a girl or something, or there was some other girl that was around that also had some sort of Navy connection as well. And she supposedly was no longer in the Navy, I think. And it was just like, I bet you the Navy were infiltrating Jack Parsons, right? And they were maybe they were getting data about the rocket program, or they were funding the rocket program, or something. Or they were like, there's just, when it comes to espionage, it's just like, it's so complex. But the thing is, this gets even more complex because guess what? Parsons was a lefty. He was a communist, right? And so they could have been worried that he was like, selling rocket secrets to Russia or something like that. And so they had to infiltrate him and bankrupt his rocket program and stuff it up and all this sort of stuff. And I actually believe when Parsons died in 1952, it was an assassination. It seems very strange how he died. They said he blew up from a rocket experiment or something, but I actually think it's because that was the era of McCarthyism where they were very strict on communists, and I don't think they cared too much about the black magic cult stuff, but it was more that he was a commie. Parsons was a commie. He was hanging out with communists and stuff. You can look at his Wikipedia page and there's heaps of hints all the way through of him being a commie. So this is why it's just so complex. But see how this could have been such a cool storyline. It would have gone all the way up to, it would have lasted for another few more seasons until he got to the point where he died. But it would have been so cool. You see what I mean? But it's cancelled. But that's where it's really complex, because it's like, because people who hate Scientology go, Hubbard was really bad. Back in 1947 or whatever, he stole as a con man, he stole Parsons' boat and ran away with his girlfriend or whatever. What an evil guy. And it's just like, you're a freaking dumbass. He was an agent on a secret mission or whatever. And if you look at you have to look so deep into it and you find out, yeah, this is actually probably what happened. And he had to take his boat, and and Parsons was a commie, and Hubbard was sabotaging him, and it's really complex. But these people like Chris Shelton just go, no, you're just a conspiracy theorist and you're just making stuff up. And it's just like, whatever, man. You're just like, you just don't know how the world works and what's actually going on. But anyway, really complex. But also, it's just like, who cares about whether or not Hubbard was a good guy or not? Anyway, it's just like, if the tech works, it works. I mean, you clear words, it works. You do an objective process, it runs out unconsciousness, and you're more awake after it. Like, it works. So who cares? But people like Chris Shelton are just looking for excuses. These Scientology haters, they're just looking for excuses to pick on Scientology, and they're just idiots. Also, this show, by the way, it's directed by, or it's got an executive producer, which is Ridley Scott. And Ridley Scott, he knows his shit. This is why it's a good show. It's not just like Game of Thrones. I don't know why people like that, but I mean, this is good. But yeah, because it's got people like Ridley Scott involved with it, because I think he was involved with Total Recall, which is just an epic movie, and he was involved with that Alien show and I think Prometheus or something. But he knows his stuff. Like, he really knows his stuff. Like, he's smart, man. So that's why partially why this show is so good. So I'm going to play you the trailer for the first season and the second season. So here we go.
I've always wondered what it'd be like being up there.
You truly do believe that you, Jack Parsons, can take us all to the moon?
You are trying to work in a field that does not even exist.
Who says we have to obey? There's a place that can help you be the man you've always dreamed of being. You just need to have an open mind.
It's referring to the cult.
My father taught me about symbols like this. Some were meant as gateways.
You think you know somebody, but there are some things you never truly know.
How can you tell when you're in the presence of evil?
I can't convey what we're capable of.
An error could be the difference between us living and dying.
We're in uncharted territory. The time for caution has long passed.
There's so that's the trailer for season 1. There's one line that he says in season 1 which is really cool when he's trying to recruit Jack into the cult, and he says something like, he goes, what are you more afraid of? Like the neighbor who was trying to recruit him, he goes, and it's a really cool line, he goes, what are you more afraid of? Trying this, or that this is all there is? Referring to life, referring to mainstream, boring, conservative life, which isn't spiritual and funky and cool and out there and stuff. I think I put it on my Facebook because it was such a good quote. I was like, oh my God. I'm getting it. But one of my Facebooks got deleted, by the way. It just keeps on happening. They just keep on coming after me. But I think that's basically the idea of the quote, is that he's saying, like, you know, what are you more afraid of? Coming and trying out my funky cult, or that this is all there is? And so if you're really bored with the mainstream, then you'll be like, that's scary. And I think I felt that before I got into Scientology and all this stuff. Like I did think I felt scared and depressed to think that this is it, this boring, shitty, just mainstream life and stuff. And so that's why I got into Scientology, because I was like, okay, yeah, I've heard some, you know, stuff on A Current Affair, the shitty TV shows, and it could be a creepy cult, but it, you know, it scares me a little bit going in there, but it probably scares me more to think of just living a mainstream life. Like, to me it feels horrible and dreadful. Like, I remember looking into the future when I didn't know about any of this, and like seeing what I'll do in the future, and just seeing myself working like a normal 9 to 5 and stuff. And I just remember feeling bad feelings of dread, like, oh, that seems horrible. Like, oh no, that seems so bad. Oh, I don't want that. You know what I mean? And so that's why this quote in the movie is just so, in the show, is just such a good quote, because it's like, what are you more afraid of? That this is all there is, or coming and trying the cult? Something like that. Really good quote. It's so true. That's what you should say to people to Scientology if they want to get into it. It's just like, you know, there's a lot of just bullshit lies put out about it and stuff like that, and it's been black PR'd by the mainstream media, but you don't want to believe anything in the mainstream media and stuff. And it's just like, you know, what are you more afraid of? Living a boring life, or coming and trying an unusual thing this weekend? And anyway, and Scientology isn't anywhere near as unusual as this black magic cult and stuff, where they're having sex and all this stuff. Like, in Scientology, you just walk into a room and 2 people will be sitting next to each other with their eyes closed. And you're like, what the hell? It's kind of funny. You know what I mean? It's not that weird, you know? Here's the season 2 trailer. This is where it gets exciting.
Today on edgeofwonder.tv, cannibalism.
That's an ad.
2.
All right.
There are rituals of the elements and feasts of the times. A feast for life and a greater feast for death.
We are up against a very dangerous enemy.
We must not lose sight of the great struggle between light and dark, good and evil.
Wouldn't we make missiles that cross oceans? We're one step closer to rockets that can reach the moon.
They're claiming to be a real religion. Can you imagine that? Every false prophet draws power from somewhere. Are you sure this is your will?
We really do have all these empty rooms.
What about your sister? She's young and impressionable. I fear for what could happen.
Long time no see, Jack.
The forces of vice and corruption have found refuge.
You feel the need to remain in control. You need to let go.
Bridge the divine. Take away all your pain.
I think I'm starting to understand what you get out of all of this.
You're trapped, Jack, caught between two worlds.
There is no other God than me.
I've done so much to protect what we have here. I can't be the reason it falls apart.
Out of the ashes, man will be reborn.
It's not just about winning this war. It's about winning every war to come.
You speak of dangerous magic.
You have to be careful fighting monsters or you might turn into one yourself.
So cool. The second season just gets so funny. It was on CBS, but it's all over now. It's crazy, but you can download it on like Pirate Bay, all of it for free, which is pretty cool. I don't know, mate. You might be able to get it somewhere legitimately, but you know, I'm into pirating basically. I think it's saved the world. The fact that you can get all the Scientology tech for free on the internet, you can get heaps of things for free. It's changed how we're functioning as a society because we're not so much into money and stuff. It's just like, you know, back in the 90s it was different. Like the internet's really changed things. It's just like, it's just information is for free. It's cool. Okay, so I'm going to play the scene where Hubbard comes into the storyline. And yeah, it's cool. That's Hubbard knocking on the door.
Morning. Heard about the ad for tenants? Heard a lot of things about you, Mr. Parsons. All bad. Very bad. It's just my kind of thing.
And you're?
Lafayette Ronald Hubbard. But my friends call me Ron.
And he's got this real funny look on his face. But basically, when Jack Parsons is standing at the door, his hot new girlfriend, which is the younger sister of his wife, comes to the door like with a tuna cover over or whatever, because they just had a big sex orgy the night before, and black magic sex orgy. And so she's the one that Hubbard runs off with, I think. So when she walks through the door, she's standing next to him, and she doesn't say anything, but she does give this look over at Hubbard, like this smiling look, like, yeah, I like you look, or something like that. And Parsons gives a similar look to Hubbard, like, yeah, I like you, or whatever. And like, it's just very funny because you're just like, oh, you could just tell the story would have just continued to just get better and better. It's a shame. Hopefully it gets made. So I guess that's it. I give it like 4.5 stars or something. Doesn't really have a cool intro song and stuff, and it doesn't have 10 seasons like X-Files has. It only has 17 episodes, but it is high quality. Like, it's like Fawlty Towers or The Office, the English Office, where they were just like these short shows that were just brilliant. And I hope they make more of it. And I hope I haven't ARC broken you too much with the truth. But remember, the truth is stranger than fiction. The truth is fucking whacked. Completely whacked. It's not whatever you think it is. That's why it's so hard to investigate things and find things out, because you have to just keep on going and sift through so many lies, so many lies, so many lies. But yeah, so it's totally cool and I recommend watching it. That's it. That's it for this briefing. I've been your host, Andy Nolch, the Space Cowboy. You've been listening to the Indie Scientology podcast. So remember, what you thought was impossible is possible.